Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Season 2 Episodes 13 and 14 titled Wormquake or The Manhattan Project. These two episodes put together were really good. They were a lot like a season finale sort of episode because, for one, they were put together, which normally doesn't happen until, they decided, it's either going to be the actual season finale or, like the mid season finale, which this episode seemed because I was wondering if it actually was the season finale because it was an hour long episode, and I was thinking the only reason they would possibly do that would be if it was a season finale. I don't think it would count as the mid season finale because technically we already had that too, and then this is the second half. So it's almost like they just kind of threw in just an amazing hour long episode for us just to kind of get a lot of development for the rest of this season because these were episodes 13 and 14, and this season is supposed to have 26 episodes. So we do have, over 10, about a dozen more episodes. So this episode did introduce a lot, and it added a lot of depth to some of the characters, and it'll be really interesting to see, some of the plot points that continue on, from this episode, and hopefully it does just, keep going next week, because of course, I didn't see a preview after I watched it, which was fairly late, because it was actually up like a week ago or so. But hopefully in the next couple of episodes we really get to dive into some of the plot points that they introduced in this episode. And of course the main one is Karai, sort of balancing between the fact that she is actually, Splinter's daughter, and by the end of this episode she does finally have a realization that it's the truth because, they kind of think she's not around, and generally when you say certain stuff when you don't think the other person's around, it's the truth. So she was listening in on that conversation at the end where Splinter's saying to everyone that she's, his daughter and stuff, and they're talking about it. So she kind of realized this, he wasn't just making it up. He was, he wouldn't just tell them all this stuff for no apparent reason. So it'll be great to see just how things change for the series now. But this is a great episode. I mean, we got a new character come in and sort of die because I'm pretty sure he didn't die. Also, I love just Tiger Claw as a character who's really cool. He was kind of, for anyone who plays Uncharted, I thought he was dressed a lot like Nathan Drake. And if you don't know Uncharted, you can look up Uncharted 3 in particular, because he has like, a little bandana, and he has just the suit. It made me think of Nathan Drake from Uncharted. But also he was a lot like Boba Fett. For anyone who loves Star Wars, you probably caught that automatically. Like at first it was just like, oh, he's kind of like a cowboy type of character because he has like, he's an assassin, but he has two pistols, and of course he has like, I think it's called like a bandolero or whatever with all the bullets, and he looked really cool. And one gun shot like fire, I guess technically, or just like regular lasers, and then the other one was like an ice gun, which I thought was cool. But he also had a jetpack, and so he's like flying around and shooting, but he can also use a sword and stuff. And I thought, this is a really cool character. And the way he died was just like Boba Fett too, where he kind of fell into the slug. Like as soon as I saw it, I was just like, just Boba Fett moment. But I loved him as a character, and I'm sure we'll get to see him come back somehow. It probably won't be this season, but the Krang are probably gonna do something and bring the worms back from Dimension X, or maybe the turtles even actually go to Dimension X the next time they see it, and somehow they'll be able to survive in that environment. And then he'll be there too, and somehow he'll be alive because he was, eaten by the worm, and they'll work something out with that. But I'm pretty sure he'll come back because he's too good of a character to just have in one episode and then, kill him off like that. So I'm sure we'll get to see him come back, and he'll face off against Splinter, and we might even get his actual story because he mentioned how he lost his tail to someone, and, he wants revenge against that person too. So I think that person will come into the series as a good guy, and then he'll come back later, and then it'll be like, oh, you're working with the Turtles, who I also happen to hate, but, you're my main focus, so the Turtles might help, whoever he wants revenge against. But it'll be really cool to see him come back. But, there's so much in this episode. Like, everyone was in it, for the most part. Shredder came back, and he sort of fought Splinter, which, I mean, he had his unfair fight a little bit. But it was cool to see him come back, so he will be in the rest of this season because he's been gone the entire time. I think he left in like the second or like the first or second episode. He just flat out left to Japan. So he finally came back with his new assassin. His new assassin is gone, but we do have Shredder, so he'll be enacting his plans and kind of dealing with some of the things that have changed. Like when he came back and he saw Bradley as Razar, he was just like, you look terrible and stuff. So I thought that was kind of funny. But he's going to be dealing with some of the minor changes that have happened since he left, like Bradley changing and some of the things that Karai did, and obviously the fact that she found out that she really is Splinter's daughter, and he's gonna have to, like, he's probably gonna figure that out, I think, because he's just that type of character where he'll notice she isn't as violent as she normally is. Something's up here. So I think we're gonna get that, as the episode where she finally decides to either turn good, or she could just flat out, leave the series for a while because she won't really know how to deal with it. But we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But it'll definitely be interesting, and also, just how the story went, where the characters kind of got split up into the separate groups, where it was Leo, Mikey, and Raph, and Splinter were basically one group, and then Donatello, April, and Casey were another group, and they were dealing with the worms while everyone else was dealing with Shredder and Karai and stuff. So it was cool to have the two separate groups doing their own stories and kind of have them merge, like, at the very end. And even then, they didn't really merge. It was just they happened to meet at the same time, and everyone saw April and Casey on the worm, just as Donatello was basically fixing their half of the story. So it was cool to have that separation, and the introduction to the sort of Grand Central Station of Dimensions was really cool too. And of course, everyone, you couldn't hate the fact that it ended with the old '80s Turtles. I thought that was really cool. It was great to see them come in, and how when the worm went from this Turtle series dimension to the old Turtle series dimension, it just looked like a silly worm until it like opened its mouth, and then it was like attacking everybody. But that was cool, and they did like the silly phrases like Mundo Bizarro and stuff. But I love that ending, and overall it's just an amazing episode. Casey and Donatello kind of got into their arguments, but by the end, Donatello saved the city, so Casey was like, you're pretty cool, and they kind of stopped their little rivalry over April, for now at least, because I'm sure that'll come back, because, they were going back and forth in this episode, more so than any other episode, because, they were actually stuck together the whole time. But, I thought that was good development for their characters, but the biggest thing, of course, like I brought up already, is Karai finding out that Splinter is her real father. So I'm excited for that more than any other plotline that was kind of introduced in this. But I am really excited to see just what the Krang do. It was cool to know where the mutagen actually came from. That was interesting. It was cool to just see Casey, and just all the fight scenes were really good. And Casey, taking on the worms, and when he got eaten by the worm, it was interesting. Like, of course, I knew he wasn't dead, but I didn't expect him to actually get eaten. But it was, it was just a good scene. And overall, love the two episodes together. Can't wait for, the rest of this season, because, this was a good episode, and it wasn't anything. It was just like, hey, let's just put two episodes together because they work better together than alone. So, really excited to see where the rest of this season goes, and of course where the rest of the series goes, what other characters they might introduce, what other random stuff might change. One interesting thing I noticed that was really quick was that Baxter Stockman had like a neck brace on. It wasn't really a neck brace, but it was sort of like a thing with mutagen around his neck. So he still is kind of locked down and stuck with Shredder's team. So he's not exactly on their side. He's still kind of being controlled. And I guess that's still technically, because I don't really remember when it was introduced, because I feel like it was so long ago. But, when they basically captured him and told him, you have to work for Shredder now, they put that thing on him. And he still has it, so he hasn't really worked up to the point where, they actually trust him. He's still in a dangerous position where at any time he could kind of screw them over or just mess up in general. And they'll set that bomb off and he'll become a mutant. So I think we will at some point actually get to see him turn into the Fly. And I cannot wait to see that, because if he's as cool as he was in the 80s cartoon, that's going to be one of my favorite episodes, because and I mentioned this before, that's one of the things I want to see most in this series is Baxter become the Fly, because when he did that in the old 80s cartoon, he went from like this super weak nerdy scientist character to like the most powerful mutant that no one could defeat, because he could fly around. He had like this laser pistols. He could, he was like a fly, so he could see everything pretty much. And it was just really cool that this super weak nerdy character became like the strongest person, and even Shredder couldn't really beat him, but he kind of mentally manipulated him. So hopefully we get something like that at some point in this series, because I still, like I said, that's one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to. But this episode, it did so much, and it was just so cool, and there's so many things that the Crane could be working on, outside of the worms, and they obviously have all this stuff set up. So excited for the rest of the season. Definitely comment below, let me know what you guys thought of it, favorite parts, least favorite parts, and how do you guys think the rest of the season is gonna go now that Karai has figured out, maybe Splinter wasn't just saying that to save his life, and maybe the turtles weren't just saying that, to save their father. So comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.